Welcome back to the ClassyJS Devlogs. This is ClassyJS Devlog number 4. All the previous devlogs are linked in the description below, alongside a link to classyjs.com, so you can download ClassyJS, follow along, and build your own projects. Today we'll begin to learn about the superpowers that object-oriented programming languages and ClassyJS give you. Inheritance is already very powerful because we can automatically use abilities of the class we inherit from. The class you inherit from is known as the superclass. For example, our dog class can use the greet method of the class it inherited from, pet. So pet is dog's superclass. Okay, so now we know about superclass, but how does that help us? Let's dive in and take a look. You were already using superclass. You just didn't know it. Anytime you inherit from another class, its constructor automatically gets called. Let's take a look at this and make it more obvious. Right now, pet's constructor doesn't do anything. Let's make a simple update and add console.log pet's constructor was called. And then let's test our code. We can see pet constructor was called. Actually, we see it was called twice because it automatically gets called for dog and cat. Let's comment out cat in our main code. First, we'll open up main, and then we'll need to do this in two places. The first place, we'll need to take out this.firstCat.greet, and the second place, we'll take out pub.firstCat. Now our code is easier to test. Let's test it one more time. Now we see pet constructor was called. We've seen that superclass is being implicitly called. How can we explicitly call it? We can go to dog, and then we can add superclass into our dog's constructor method. Let's test again. We get exactly the same results. ClassyJS will always implicitly call your superclass for you, unless you call it explicitly. This begs the question, why does the superclass constructor always get called? It's always called because the superclass constructor may be doing some important setup that your new class needs. Let's try doing some important setup inside pet. One of the most important habits a developer needs to practice is looking for duplicate code. We found a lot last time and put it all into the superclass pet. When we look at dog and cat now, we can see that there is still some duplicate code. We'll remove this duplicate code by using pet's ability to do important setup for us. Right now, cat and dog both set this.name and this.sound inside of their constructors. We can improve this by moving this code inside the pet class. Let's move this.name into the pet class. We'll cut this.name and we'll paste it into the pet class. Now that pet is trying to set this.name with name, it needs to get name from somewhere. Dog got name from its argument name passed into its constructor. Let's do the same for pet by adding name into its constructor's argument. Now it's time to test this and see what we get. Okay, it looks like we have an error. Class dog is calling the superclass for class pet, which requires one argument. It was passed 0 arguments. What this means is, now that pet has an argument in its constructor, we are required to call superclass with the correct number of arguments. In this case, we only have one argument. Let's take a look at dog. It's not passing any arguments when it calls superclass. Let's pass through the name value we got passed into dog by adding name into superclass. Now let's test this again. Boom! It's working. Dog is now even cleaner because its superclass pet is doing some of the setup for it. The next step is to clean up dog even further by handing even more of the setup over to its superclass pet. To do this, we need to remove the code this.sound equals bark and pass just bark to the superclass, which sounds like a great opportunity for you to try implementing this yourself. Try these things. Remove doing the setup of this.sound equals bark from dog and just pass bark to the pet class. This will also involve adding a new argument, sound, to the pet class's constructor, and then performing the setup of this.sound equals sound in your pet class. Once you've succeeded at that, turn the cat class back on inside main and clean it up to match dog. This week's devlog was pretty advanced. It's beginning to go deeper into the world of inheritance by accessing the superclass. I'd like to take a moment to go over some nuances of superclass as we've used it so far. If your superclass doesn't take any arguments, you don't need to call superclass. ClassyJS takes care of that for you. This makes sure that you never forget and it keeps your code shorter. If you want to, you can explicitly call superclass in your constructor. If you add any arguments to your superclass's constructor, you are now required to call superclass with the matching number of arguments. This is similar to calling any method with arguments. You need to pass the correct number of arguments in. Okay, until next week, thanks for coming back and joining us for another ClassyJS devlog. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.